The dragons came on a Tuesday. Admiral Sarah Chun was drinking coffee in her office on Proxima Station when the first reports arrived. 3 massive contacts had appeared at the edge of the system, moving fast. Too fast for cargo ships. Too big for fighters. The sensors couldn't identify what they were, but they were heading straight for the colony world below. Sarah set down her cup and walked to the command center. By the time she arrived, the contacts had split into dozens of smaller signatures. The comm channels were already filling with confused chatter from the planetary defense grid. Nobody had seen anything like this before. Then one of the contacts got close enough for visual confirmation. It was a dragon. A real living dragon, flying through space without a ship. Its scales gleamed like polished bronze, each one the size of a shuttle. Wings that shouldn't work in vacuum somehow propelled it forward faster than most human fighters. When it opened its mouth, fire poured out in a stream that cut through a defense satellite like paper. Sarah had seen a lot of strange things in her 30 years with the fleet. She had fought pirates, negotiated with alien traders, and once watched a gas giant collapse into a black hole. But she had never seen anything like this. Dragons were supposed to be myths, stories from old Earth. They weren't supposed to be real. And they definitely weren't supposed to be attacking her station. The dragon dove toward Proxima Colony, and 30 more followed behind it. The defense platforms opened fire, but the weapons just bounced off those bronze scales. Missiles exploded harmlessly against their hides. Energy beams scattered like light hitting a mirror. The dragons didn't even slow down. They hit the main city first. Sarah watched on the screen as streams of fire poured down from the sky, turning buildings into slag. The heat was so intense that the camera feeds kept cutting out. When they came back online, entire city blocks were gone, replaced by pools of molten metal and glass. The evacuation sirens were wailing across the colony. 4 million people trying to reach the shelters all at once. The traffic systems collapsed within minutes. People abandoned their cars and ran on foot, parents carrying children, elderly folks struggling to keep up. The dragons didn't care. They burned everything. Sarah's hands were shaking as she pulled up the fleet status. Proxima Station had 12 warships docked for resupply. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But she gave the order anyway. Every ship that could fly was to launch immediately and engage the enemy. Maybe they could buy time for the evacuation. The ships launched within 3 minutes. They formed up in a defensive screen between the dragons and the colony. Captain Rodriguez in the destroyer Valiant fired first, hitting one of the smaller dragons with a full broadside. The creature stumbled in midair, surprised by the impact. Then it shook itself off and kept flying. The scales where the shots had hit were barely scratched. Rodriguez tried again with heavier guns. The dragon answered by landing on his ship and tearing through the hull with its claws. The Valiant broke apart in seconds, atmosphere venting into space. 200 crew gone, just like that. The other ships kept fighting. They died one by one, bought maybe 10 minutes of time. It wasn't enough. The largest dragon, the one with bronze scales that seemed to glow from within, landed on top of the main evacuation center. Sarah watched as it simply breathed, and the entire building melted. Thousands of people had been inside, waiting for transport. Now there was nothing but cooling metal and ash. Sarah's second officer, Lieutenant Park, was crying quietly at his station. His family lived down there. Lived. Past tense now. The attack lasted 6 hours. When it was over, Proxima Colony was gone. 4 million people reduced to smoke and ruins. The dragons gathered in orbit afterward, circling the dead world like vultures. Then the largest one, the bronze monster that had killed so many, sent a transmission. The voice that came through was deep and old, like rocks grinding together. It spoke perfect English, which somehow made it worse. "Humans of the Federation," it said. I am Elder Wormcaster of the Draconic Sovereignty. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. You are young and weak. You will submit to our authority, or you will burn like this world has burned. You have 7 days to surrender. Choose wisely." The transmission cut off. The dragons turned and flew away, disappearing into slipspace. They left Proxima Station intact, probably so Sarah could deliver their message. They wanted humanity to be afraid. They wanted surrender. Sarah stood in the command center, looking at the screen that showed her dead world. Around her, people were crying or sitting in shock or trying to process what they had just witnessed. The comm channels were lighting up with calls from other colonies, from Earth, from the Senate. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. Everyone wanted to know what humanity should do. Sarah knew what the Senate would say. They would call for negotiation. They would talk about preserving lives. They would probably agree to surrender. After all, what choice did they have? Humanity's weapons couldn't even scratch dragon scales. How could they fight something that could breathe fire in vacuum and fly faster than ships? But Sarah wasn't thinking about surrender. She was thinking about Lieutenant Park's family, about the 4 million people who had died today, about the Valiant and her crew who had fought knowing they couldn't win, about every human being who had trusted her to keep them safe. She opened a new channel, the emergency frequency that reached every human ship, every colony, every station in known space. Her voice was steady when she spoke, cold as the void outside. "This is Admiral Sarah-chan of Proxima Station. Today the dragons came. Today they murdered 4 million of us. They tell us we are weak. They tell us to surrender or die. I have a different message." She paused, making sure every human in the galaxy was listening. "No more mercy. Send coordinates. Send ships. Send everything we have. The dragons think we're prey. Let's show them what humans really are." She closed the channel and turned to her crew. Park was staring at her with red eyes. The others looked shocked, scared, but also something else. Something harder. "Get me aligned to military research," Sarah said quietly. "Tell them I want every weapon we've ever built and every weapon we thought about building. Tell them the rules just changed." Outside the window, Proxima Colony still burned. Dr. James Okafor had spent 15 years studying alien biology. He had dissected creatures from a dozen worlds, mapped genetic codes that humanity had never seen before, and published papers that other scientists called groundbreaking. He thought he understood life in all its forms. Then they brought him a dragon-scale dot. It arrived at his lab 3 days after Proxima burned, sealed in a containment unit and guarded by 6 armed soldiers. The scale had been recovered from the hull of the Valiant before the wreckage drifted away. It was the size of a dinner plate, bronze in color, and completely undamaged despite being hit by weapons that should have vaporized it. James picked it up carefully. It was warm to the touch, heavier than steel, but somehow flexible. He ran every test he could think of. Electron microscopy showed a crystalline structure that shouldn't be possible in organic material. Thermal imaging revealed it was generating its own heat. Genetic analysis found DNA patterns that matched no known species. "It's impossible," James said to his assistant. "Maya, this thing violates half the laws of physics." Maya was looking at the cellular breakdown on her screen. "Look at this. The cells are producing energy like a fusion reactor. That's how they breathe fire in space. They're not really breathing it. They're generating it internally." James leaned closer. She was right. The dragons weren't biological creatures in any normal sense. They were living weapons, evolved or engineered to survive in conditions that would kill anything else. No wonder human weapons couldn't hurt them. His terminal beeped. A message from Admiral Chun, marked urgent. James opened it and read quickly. Chun wanted results. She wanted to know how to kill dragons. She wanted it fast. James looked at the scale again. Then he looked at Maya. Get me everyone from the weapons division. Tell them to bring everything we're not supposed to talk about. 6 hours later, James was standing in front of 50 scientists and engineers in a sealed conference room. These were the people who designed humanity's worst weapons, the ones that violated treaties and made politicians nervous. They had been told to think without limits, without ethics, without mercy. We need to kill dragons, James said simply. I need ideas. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Dr. Sarah Voss from Weapons Research raised her hand. We've been looking at the data from Proxima. The dragons can survive in vacuum, but they still breathe. They still have respiratory systems. What if we target that? How? Someone asked. Biological weapons. Something airborne that attacks their lungs. We engineer a virus specifically for their biology. James nodded slowly. That could work. But we need delivery systems. The dragons won't just sit still while we spray them with pathogens. Commander Marcus Webb stood up. He was Navy through and through, and he looked like he hadn't slept since Proxima. We use drones. Small, fast, disposable. Each one carries the weapon. They swarm a dragon and inject it directly. They'll burn the drones, someone pointed out. So we make thousands of them. Millions if we need to. Overwhelm their defenses with numbers. Marcus looked around the room. Humans are good at mass production. Let's use it. More ideas came flooding in. Someone suggested sonic weapons tuned to resonate with dragon bone structure. Another proposed railguns firing projectiles cooled to near absolute zero to exploit the thermal differential in dragon scales. A young engineer named Thomas Chun, no relation to the Admiral, suggested quantum tracking devices that could follow dragons even when they jumped to slipspace. James wrote everything down. Some ideas were brilliant. Some were crazy. Some were both. But they all had one thing in common. They were designed to kill. Over the next 3 months, humanity turned itself into a weapons factory. Every colony, every station, every ship not actively fighting contributed. The Prometheus Initiative, as they called it, became the largest military project in human history. It made the old nuclear programs look small. They built the drones first. Millions of them, each one the size of a football, packed with neurotoxins designed specifically for dragon biochemistry. The toxins took 2 months to develop and another month to test on tissue samples. When they finally had a working version, it could shut down a dragon's nervous system in under 30 seconds. The sonic weapons came next. They were massive, ugly things that looked like satellite dishes welded to ship hulls. When activated, they produced sound waves at frequencies that made dragon bones vibrate. Not enough to kill immediately, but enough to cause terrible pain and, with sustained exposure, structural failure. The railguns were simpler. Humanity had been using railgun technology for centuries. The innovation was in the ammunition. They created projectiles made of frozen nitrogen, cooled to temperatures where matter became brittle. When these hit superheated dragon scales, the thermal shock would cause microscopic fractures. Enough fractures, and the scales would shatter. The quantum trackers were the hardest. They required technology that was still experimental, expensive, and often didn't work. But when they did work, they were perfect. A dragon tagged with a quantum marker couldn't hide, couldn't escape, couldn't run. Humanity would always know where it was. James worked 18-hour days, sleeping in his lab. Maya and the others kept similar schedules. They all knew people who had died at Proxima or the 4 other colonies. The dragons had burned after humanity refused to surrender. This wasn't just science anymore. It was personal. Admiral Chun visited the lab once, 6 weeks into the project. She walked through the facility quietly, looking at the weapons being assembled. When she reached James's office, she sat down without being invited. "Tell me honestly," she said. "Will this work?" James was tired enough to be honest. "I don't know. We're making weapons to kill creatures that shouldn't exist. We're breaking laws that most people think are sacred. We're becoming something we said we'd never be again." "That's not what I asked." James met her eyes. "The weapons will work. Whether we can get close enough to use them is your problem, not mine." Chun nodded. "Fair enough. How long until you're done?" 2 more months for the first production run. 6 months for full deployment. You have 4 months total. After that, we move whether you're ready or not." Chun stood up. "The dragons hit another colony yesterday. New Beijing. 2 billion people. They're not waiting, so neither can we." James felt sick. 2 billion. The number was too big to understand. "I'll have something ready in 4 months." "Good." Chun walked to the door, then paused. "Dr. Okafor, when this is over, assuming we survive, there will be tribunals. People will want to prosecute everyone involved in this project. War crimes, crimes against sapient life, violations of the Geneva Conventions. You understand that?" "I understand. Are you prepared to face that?" James looked at the dragon scale sitting on his desk. He thought about New Beijing, about Proxima, about all the people who were dead because dragons thought humans were weak. If we lose, there won't be any tribunals because there won't be any humans left. If we win, I'll face whatever comes. But right now, the only thing I care about is making sure we win." Chun smiled grimly. "You're starting to think like a soldier. I'm not sure if that's good or bad." After she left, James went back to work. Around him, the Prometheus initiative continued. Weapons were assembled, tested, refined. Ships were retrofitted with new systems. Crews were trained on equipment they had never seen before. Humanity was preparing for war in a way it hadn't since the old days on Earth, back when humans only fought each other. Commander Webb assembled his fleet in secret, far from any colony that dragons might attack. 5,000 ships, ranging from massive battleships to small fighters. Every one of them volunteered. Every one of them had lost someone to dragon fire. They called themselves the First Retaliation Fleet, and they had one mission to make the dragons pay in his lab. James finished the final tests on the biological weapon. It worked. It worked frighteningly well. He loaded the data into a secure drive and sent it to Admiral Chun with a simple message. "We're ready. It's your turn now." 4 months after Proxima burned, humanity stopped running. They stopped defending. They stopped trying to negotiate. Instead, they loaded their new weapons, pointed their ships toward the Draconis throne system, and prepared to show the dragons what mercy looked like when humans decided they didn't have any left to give. The first retaliation. Fleet emerged from slipspace in perfect formation. 5,000 ships arranged in a sphere around the Draconis throne system. At the center of that sphere was Draconis Prime, the ancient homeworld of the dragons. Untouched by war for 10,000 years, Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Retribution. Around her, the crew worked in focused silence. Nobody was talking. Nobody was joking. They all knew what came next. "All ships report ready," Lieutenant Park said. His voice was steady now, hardened by months of preparation and loss. Weapons armed. Drones deployed. Quantum markers active. Sarah looked at the tactical display. Draconis Prime was beautiful from orbit, a world of bronze and gold with cities that gleamed like jewels. Dragons circled lazily in the atmosphere, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They didn't look worried. Why would they? Nobody had ever attacked their home. "Broadcast on all frequencies," Sarah said. "I want them to hear this." Park nodded and opened the channel. Sarah's voice went out across the system, translated into the dragon language by computers that had learned it from intercepted communications. Elder Worm Castor, you came to Proxima and burned 4 million of my people. You told us we were weak. You told us to surrender or die. We chose neither. Today, we bring you our answer. She closed her hand into a fist. Fire everything. The human fleet opened up all at once. 5,000 ships unleashing every weapon they had built, every innovation born from rage and grief. The sphere of fire converged on Draconis Prime like a collapsing star. The dragons reacted quickly, launching themselves from their cities to meet the attack. They came in waves, thousands of them, scales gleaming in every color from bronze to silver to deep crimson. At their head flew Castor himself, 3 times the size of any other dragon. His scales glowing like molten metal dye, he looked magnificent. He looked unstoppable. He looked exactly like what he was, a creature that had ruled the galaxy since before humanity learned to walk upright. Then the drones hit him. They came in clouds. Millions of tiny machines moving too fast for dragon eyes to track. Castor tried to burn them, breath washing over the swarm like a wave of nuclear fire. Hundreds of drones died, thousands, but there were always more. The first drone that got through landed on his neck, between 2 scales. It injected its payload directly into his bloodstream before he could shake it off. Then another hit, then 10 more, then 100. Castor roared, a sound that shook the hulls of nearby ships. He clawed at his own neck, trying to remove the drones. But they were already inside him, and the neurotoxin was spreading fast. The other dragons saw their elder struggling and dove to help. They made it 3 seconds before the sonic weapons activated. The sound was inaudible to humans, but the dragons heard it. Every dragon in the system heard it, felt it in their bones. The frequency was perfect, tuned exactly to their skeletal structure. Their bones began to vibrate, creating harmonics that traveled through their entire bodies. A smaller dragon near the front of the formation simply came apart, bones shattering from the inside. Others fell from the sky, bleeding from their eyes and mouths. Some tried to flee, but the quantum markers were already active. Humanity knew where every dragon was, where they were going, where they would be. Commander Webb led the fighter squadrons impersonally. His ship, a small interceptor called Last Word, screamed through the dragon formations with 50 others following. The railguns mounted on their hulls fired in sequence. Each shot a spike of frozen nitrogen moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The projectiles hit dragon scales with temperatures differential of thousands of degrees. The thermal shock created fractures, microscopic at first, but spreading rapidly. A dragon's natural heat made it worse. Their own bodies worked against them, expanding the cracks until whole sections of scale simply fell away. Underneath, the dragons were soft, vulnerable, mortal. Webb's squadron concentrated fire on a crimson dragon that was trying to rally a defense. The frozen rounds punched through its damaged scales and into flesh beneath. The dragon screamed and tried to turn to fight back. Webb put 3 more rounds into its exposed flank. It fell. Target down, he reported, voice cold. Moving to next. The battle lasted 6 hours, and it was slaughter. Not because the dragons were weak, but because humanity had spent 4 months learning exactly how to kill them. Every weapon had been designed for one purpose. Every tactic had been refined through simulation and calculation. The humans fought like machines, efficient and merciless. Castor lasted longer than most. He was old, powerful, and too proud to die easily. Even with the neurotoxin eating away at his nervous system, even with his bones vibrating to pieces, he fought. He killed 3 ships personally, tearing through their hulls with claws that could cut steel. But he couldn't kill them all, couldn't even slow them down. For every ship he destroyed, 10 more took its place. The drones never stopped coming. The sonic weapons never stopped screaming. The frozen rounds never stopped finding their marks. Sarah watched him from the Retribution's bridge, watched him struggle and weaken, and finally realized he was going to die. She activated a special system they had built just for this moment, a quantum snare that locked him in normal space. No slip-space escape. No dimensional tricks. Just him and humanity. She opened a direct channel to the dying elder. "You asked us to choose," she said quietly. "Surrender or burn. We chose to burn you instead." Castor's response came through garbled, his voice system failing. "You are monsters. Worse than we ever were." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "You made us this way. Every human who died made us harder. Every world you burned made us colder. You wanted to see what humanity really was. Congratulations, you found out." The biological weapon hit Castor then, the final payload from 1,000 drones. His cells began to rewrite themselves, consuming energy instead of producing it. His internal fire, the source of his power, turned inward. He burned from the inside, experiencing what 4 million humans at Proxima had felt in their last moments. When he finally died, his body fell toward Draconis Prime, a falling star marking the end of an era. The human fleet didn't celebrate. They couldn't afford to. There were still hundreds of dragons alive, still fighting. Sarah gave the order, and the fleet pressed the attack. Methodical and thorough. By the time the sun set on Draconis Prime, the sky was empty of dragons. The cities below were intact but silent. The dragons had kept their civilians there, thinking it would protect them. They were wrong. Humanity didn't touch the cities. They didn't need to. Every adult dragon had come out to fight, and every single one was dead. Lieutenant Park brought up a damage report. The human fleet had lost 2,000 ships, nearly 1,000,000 crew. The losses were staggering, worse than any battle in human history. And yet, when Sarah looked at the tactical display showing Draconis Prime defenseless beneath them, she felt nothing. No satisfaction. No guilt. Just emptiness. "Admiral," Park said quietly, "Earth is asking what our next orders are. The Senate wants us to stop, to negotiate with the surviving dragons. They're saying we've made our point." Sarah looked at the planet below, thinking about Proxima. About New Beijing. About all the humans who would never get to make points or negotiate or live their lives. She thought about what Castor had said. Monsters. Maybe he was right. "Contact the fleet," she said. "Give them coordinates for every known dragon colony. Every nest. Every breeding ground. Every stronghold. We move in 1 hour. Ma'am, the Senate. The Senate can court-martial me when this is over. Right now, we finish what the dragons started." She turned to look at Park, and he saw something in her eyes that made him step back. "No mercy. That's what I promised. That's what they get." The first retaliation fleet departed from Draconis Prime an hour later, leaving the homeworld intact but conquered. They jumped to the next system on their list, and then the next, and the next. The war had entered its final phase. The dragons had awakened something in humanity that hadn't fully emerged since the old days on Earth, when humans fought each other with nuclear fire and biological weapons. That darkness had been sleeping for centuries, controlled by laws and ethics and civilization. The dragons had killed the civilization. Now they were meeting what was underneath, and it showed no mercy at all. The war lasted 2 more years, but everyone knew how it would end after Draconis Prime fell. The dragons tried to regroup, tried to form new strategies, tried to negotiate. Humanity answered every attempt with the same thing. Silence, followed by weapons fire. Dr. James Okafor stopped counting after the 15th dragon colony was eliminated. He had moved from research to field deployment, overseeing the biological weapons personally. Each operation was the same. Find the dragons. Release the pathogens. Wait for them to die. Move to the next target. He didn't sleep well anymore. When he closed his eyes, he saw dragon faces. Some were warriors who had burned human worlds, but many were not. He saw scholars, artists, children. The dragons had families, culture, history, and humanity was erasing all of it. Maya found him one night in the lab, staring at a container of the neurotoxin they had developed. "You should rest," she said gently. "I created this," James said. "I designed a weapon that kills an entire species. Do you know what that makes me? It makes you human. We all are." Maya sat down next to him. "The dragons started this, James. We're just finishing it." "Are we? Or did we become something worse?" He turned the container in his hands. "Castor called us monsters before he died. I read the transcript. What if he was right?" Maya didn't have an answer for that. Nobody did. Commander Marcus Webb lost count of how many dragons he had killed. His fighter wing had become legendary in the fleet, the most efficient killers in humanity's arsenal. They were called the Reapers, and dragons fled when they saw them coming. But the dragons couldn't flee far enough. The quantum markers saw to that. Every tagged dragon was hunted down, tracked across light years if necessary. Some tried to hide in asteroid fields. Some tried to disguise their signatures. Some simply ran, hoping to escape to unmapped space. It never worked. Humanity had become very good at finding things that didn't want to be found. Webb's squadron cornered the last group of warrior dragons in the Outer Rim territories. 12 of them, hiding in a nebula and hoping they were safe. They had been warriors once, part of the force that burned New Beijing. Now they were refugees, tired and desperate. They begged for mercy when the humans found them. They offered information, offered to serve, offered anything if humanity would just let them live. Webb listened to their pleas through his translator, his face expressionless. Then he gave the order to fire. His wingman, a pilot named Sarah Chun, Lieutenant Park's cousin, questioned him afterward. They were surrendering. They wanted to live. So did the 2 billion people at New Beijing, Webb replied. Did the dragons show them mercy? That's not the point. We're supposed to be better than them. Webb looked at her for a long moment. Maybe we were, once, but better doesn't survive. Better doesn't win. The dragons taught us that. The Senate tried to stop it. 3 months after Draconis Prime fell, they passed a resolution demanding the fleet stand down and allow negotiations with surviving dragon populations. Admiral Chun received the order and ignored it. The fleet continued its operations. Earth sent more orders. Then threats. Then they tried to cut off supplies and reinforcements. It didn't matter. The fleet had planned for this. They had supply ships, manufacturing facilities, everything they needed to be self-sufficient. They didn't need Earth's permission anymore. The Senate declared Chun a war criminal. They issued an arrest warrant. They promised trials for everyone involved in the Prometheus Initiative. Chun broadcast her response across all human channels. When the dragons came, you wanted to surrender. You were ready to give up everything because fighting seemed too hard, too costly, too ugly. We fought anyway. We became what we needed to become to survive. If that makes us criminals, then judge us after the dragons are gone. Until then, stay out of our way. The message was blunt, almost treasonous. But the fleet stayed loyal to Chun. They had seen too much, lost too much. They weren't going to stop until the job was done. Dr. Okafor finally confronted Chen 18 months into the campaign. He found her in her quarters aboard the Retribution, reviewing casualty reports. She looked older than she had at Proxima, hotter. We need to stop, James said without preamble. The dragon population is down to less than 10,000. They're not a threat anymore. We've won, have we? Chun didn't look up from her reports. As long as one dragon lives, they could rebuild, could come back, could burn more of our worlds. That's paranoia talking. Most of the survivors are civilians, children. They've never hurt anyone. Their parents said the same thing before they burned Proxima. Chun finally looked at him. You want me to stop because you feel guilty. That's fine. You should feel guilty. I feel guilty. Everyone in this fleet should feel guilty. But guilt doesn't change what needs to be done. And what needs to be done? Genocide? Is that really who we are? Chun stood up slowly. 4 months ago, you told me you'd face any tribunal as long as we won. What changed? I've been watching what we're doing. I've been part of it. I realize we haven't just been killing dragons. We've been killing ourselves. The humanity that existed before Proxima is gone. We burned it away along with everything else. Good, Chun said coldly. That humanity was weak. It couldn't protect itself. This new version can. James stared at her. You don't really believe that. For a moment, something flickered in Chun's eyes. Pain, maybe. Doubt. But it vanished quickly. It doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what I do. And I'm going to make sure no dragon ever threatens humanity again. Even if that means becoming the monster they thought we were. The last dragon died on a cold moon in the Outer Rim, 23 months after Proxima burned. She was a female, old and alone, hiding in a cave system. The human team that found her was led by Webb himself. He stood at the cave entrance with his weapon ready while his squad moved in. They found her in the deepest chamber, curled around something. As they got closer, they realized it was a clutch of eggs. 7 of them, probably the last dragon eggs in the galaxy. The female didn't fight. She couldn't. She was dying already, too old and too tired. She just looked at Webb with ancient eyes and spoke in careful English. Please, not the eggs. They are innocent. Webb thought about Proxima, about New Beijing, about all the innocent humans who had died. He thought about mercy and what it meant and whether there was any left in the universe. Then he burned the cave. The eggs, the female, all of it. When he reported back to Chun, his voice was flat. Last target eliminated. Dragon species confirmed extinct. Chun closed her eyes. For the first time in 2 years, she felt something other than cold determination. She felt tired. Recall the fleet. It's over. The first retaliation fleet returned to Earth 3 weeks later. They expected arrests, trials, maybe executions. Instead, they found something unexpected. Humanity had built memorials at Proxima, at New Beijing, at every world the dragons had burned. And at the center of each memorial was a statue of Admiral Sarah Chun. The Senate had reversed its position. In the face of public opinion, they declared Chun and her fleet heroes. The trials were canceled. The charges were dropped. Humanity celebrated its victory and survival. But Chun didn't feel like a hero. Neither did Webb or Okafor or anyone who had been part of it. They had saved humanity, yes, but they had done it by becoming something they barely recognized. James stood at the Proxima Memorial a month after returning to Earth. The statue was impressive, showing Chun with her hand raised in defiance. The inscription read, "She showed no mercy so that we might live." It should say something else, a voice said behind him. James turned to find Chun herself, out of uniform and looking very human. What should it say? He asked. It should say the truth. That we became monsters to fight monsters. That we sacrificed everything we were to survive. That mercy died the day Proxima burned, and we're the ones who killed it. She looked at the statue with something like disgust. But nobody wants to hear that. They want heroes. They want to believe we were righteous, weren't we? We defended ourselves. We protected humanity by wiping out an entire species, by hunting down civilians and children, by becoming exactly what we fought against. Chun shook her head. History will remember us as heroes, but we'll remember the truth. And that's a worse punishment than any tribunal could give us. James had no answer to that. They stood together in silence, two architects of genocide, looking at a memorial to their victory and wondering if survival had been worth the cost. The galaxy moved on. New species rose to fill the power vacuum the dragons left behind. Humanity took its place as a major power, respected and feared. Nobody threatened human worlds anymore. Nobody dared, because they all knew what humans were now, what they could become when pushed, what they would do to survive. The dragons had wanted to know if humanity would surrender or fight. They got their answer. But the answer came with a price that nobody anticipated. Humanity survived, but it survived by learning that mercy was a luxury reserved for times of peace. And in a universe that had shown them no mercy. Humans had learned to give none in return. In the end, the dragons were extinct. But so was the humanity that had existed before them. Both species had burned. Only one had been left alive to tell the story. Whether that counted as victory or tragedy depended on who you asked, and on how honest they were willing to be.